Hello, everyone. We have a very important program for you today. We are obviously dealing with the war in Gaza and the war on 3 or 4 fronts that Israel is dealing with. This is the historic week of Kristallnacht, the 85th anniversary, and ironically, we see attacks against not just Israel on multiple fronts, but on Jewish communities around the world, from Dartmouth University, Columbia, Harvard, Stanford, to the streets of London, and even airports in Russia. So I think we all are aware of how dangerous and toxic the situation is around the world. If there's one point of light in this situation, we would urge you to focus on what European leaders are saying and doing. Just today, the British ambassador in Israel condemned Hamas again and said that British policy is to see and hope is to see an Israeli victory over Hamas. The German chancellor again just condemned the Hamas atrocities today with the tragic death of one of the Israeli German dual citizens that you've all seen. I think we're seeing strong support from European politicians, but their streets are, they're facing their own internal difficulties with the radical left, Muslim communities, extremists. Some of it is to the level of terror threats, as it's being seen in the UK right now. Governments are handling the situation and trying to protect the Jewish communities. And here ELNET also is playing a role in making sure that they're not just up to date and educated and coming to Israel on our delegations, but also doing everything they can to protect their own Jewish communities, our brothers and sisters at this fraught moment. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Sarah Feinberg, who is now a board member of ELNET Israel. She's a senior researcher, as you've seen, head of the Great Powers Research Program, Tel Aviv University's El Rom Center for Air and Space Studies. She's also a lecturer at Tel Aviv University and at Georgetown University, among her many other responsibilities and activities. So it's a great honor to have you today with us, Sarah, to introduce our speaker in our program. So Dr. Feinberg, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, David, for this introduction. I'm delighted today to welcome Andrew Tucker, and I will tell you why. A few days ago, I accompanied an ELNET delegation to Sderot and to Be'eri and to the places of massacre. And every sound person who goes there understands at the gut feeling that a crime against humanity occurred there, or even one could argue even a genocidal enterprise. But we are not international law experts. And that's why this is a privilege. And this is so important to delve into this complex issue with international law expert Andrew Tucker, who has nearly 2 decades of experience as an attorney specializing in international law. He served as the executive director of Christians for Israel International, based in the Netherlands. And Andrew is at the forefront of establishing the Hague Center for International Law and Public Policy in the Middle East, which is a think tank dedicated to promoting freedom and justice in the Middle East based on the rule of law. He also works as legal counsel to the European Coalition for Israel, a Brussels-based organization focused on education and advocacy and prayer. And in this role, he's part of a team advocating for the position and the interests of the State of Israel under international law within the European Union and the United Nations. So we are so honored to have Andrew with us tonight, who will enlighten us on those issues. Andrew, I will go straight to the point. I was appalled this week and last week to see that a moral and strategic equivalence is being made between the crimes of Hamas. They are appalling, but they're justified, and the crimes of the IDF. And not only that, but the crimes of Hamas are often presented as a response to the repeated crimes of the IDF in the past 75 years. And I want to ask you, Andrew, to my little knowledge, you have three main categories defining a crime or mass atrocity: a war crime, a crime against humanity, and a genocide. In your professional assessment, to which category belong the massacres perpetrated by Hamas operatives and Palestinian civilians on October 7th?
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you so much for this opportunity. It's wonderful to see so many online. So I'm speaking to you from The Hague in the Netherlands, where I am based. And a small correction, the name of our organization has changed somewhat. We are established as the Hague Initiative for International Cooperation. I can share that in the chat if you want in a moment, our website. And we're a global network of international lawyers, mainly Christian and Jewish, who are seeking to understand the position of Israel better and to advocate the position of Israel, to push back against delegitimization of Israel. That's kind of our core mission. So to come to your question, Sarah, I would say that the crimes committed, there are various crimes committed by Hamas on the 7th of October, the main ones being the brutal killing, murder, and horrible rapings and all kinds of activities in Israel as they breached the wall. And so there are, first of all, crimes according to Israeli law. There are also crimes against humanity, I think, under the Rome Statute. We can come back to that in a moment, the role of the International Criminal Court. And then there's, of course, the hostage issue, which is a separate crime in itself, also a crime against humanity. That would be the category I would put most of those activities in. But all of them are crimes under international criminal law, potentially, as well as being breaches of international humanitarian law under the Geneva Conventions.
Thank you, Andrew. Can you speak to the genocidal intent of the attack? A crime is measured by the intention. And if we are to consider that Hamas wanted to exterminate as many Jews as possible, they were about to perpetrate a chemical attack on a vast scale, do you think that this crime is closer to genocidal enterprise or to crime against humanity that belongs to the long history of crimes against humanity in the 21st and 20th centuries?
Look, I definitely think there is grounds for looking. Of course, it's not just this one isolated incident. We're talking about an organization which has, according to its charter, the very purpose is a genocidal intent, namely to eliminate Jews from Palestine. And in fact, the killing of Jews generally is perpetrated and promoted in the Hamas charter. Hamas is, of course, a proxy of Iran. Iran is clearly has expressed its intention to destroy the Jewish people, certainly to destroy Israel. So I think there are very strong arguments that this is a genocidal campaign which it has manifested itself in many different ways, and one of them is the events on the 7th of October, but I would see it as a much broader network and campaign of activities. And, you know, of course, the ongoing firing of missiles into Israel, the whole enterprise is continuing on a day-by-day basis. So I would hope that the court, the International Criminal Court, which has announced yesterday, the prosecutor, that he intends to now devote more serious attention, more dedicated attention to investigating and eventually prosecuting crimes under the Rome Statute, that he will look at these in that context.
Andrew, I would like to speak about the ICC. There is today a controversy, you know, in Europe and in other places regarding the refusal of the State of Israel to let the Prosecutor General of the ICC, Karim Khan, enter in Israel. You may have seen, Andrew, that yesterday the General Prosecutor spoke in very surprising terms. I quote, he spoke about the crimes allegedly committed in Israel on the 7th of October, allegedly. So he seems to challenge not only the evidence provided by Israel, but the evidence provided by Hamas operatives themselves, who, as opposed to the Nazis, made every effort to document and to live stream their crimes. So in this context, do you think, Andrew, Israel should consider submitting evidence to the ICC, cooperating with the ICC? Of course, Israel is not a party to the ICC, whereas the Palestinians are, but they're not a state. It's very complicated. Or do you think that Israel should remain in its, you know, rejection policy, saying you don't enter my space, and considering that the ICC in any way is a political body?
Look, excellent questions, Sarah. Let's just look at the first one. The courts made a determination 3 years ago that it has jurisdiction in relation to the situation in Palestine, as it's called. In fact, it's called the situation in the state of Palestine, which is remarkable given that the state of Palestine does not exist. Nevertheless, courts, the pre-trial chamber, in a ruling of a majority of 2, a dissenting voice, an important dissenting voice of the Hungarian judge Kovács, the court decided that the state of Palestine exists sufficiently to be a state party to the Rome Statute, even though there are question marks about whether it exists as a matter of law. That's enough, that ruling, for the prosecutor now to be moving on, and he's left that whole question behind him. And yesterday launched, I thought it was a remarkable speech that he gave in Cairo, in which, exactly as you say, he questioned the evidence, remarkably questioned the reliability of the evidence of the events of the 7th of October, seemingly putting the onus on Israel or the others to prove that case. And yet, on the other hand, putting the onus on Israel to prove that protected sites in Gaza are not protected under the Geneva Conventions. Now, this is remarkable in itself, because he seems to be switching the onus of proof, on the one hand, very heavily in favor of Hamas in relation to their alleged crimes, as he called them. And in relation to Israel's activity, there's a kind of presumption that Israel is already committing war crimes or other breaches of international humanitarian law. So that in itself, I think, is further evidence, to my mind, that Israel should stay very clear of the court. my thinking would be, and I think probably that's the view in Israel itself, although I know views differ on this, but the court has shown itself to be an unreliable partner in this case. All of the proceedings from 2014 leading right up to the pretrial chamber decision in 2020, Israel has been isolated, it's been ignored, its position has been overridden by the prosecutor, and I think the chances of Israel getting a fair hearing at the court are next to zero. There's, as you say, there's a kind of a moral equivalence happening here, that Israel's alleged crimes are seen to be somehow on the same level as those of Hamas, which I think is an inversion of responsibility. Israel is responding in a legitimate exercise of self-defense to an aggressive attack by a non-state actor on its territory in an ongoing fashion. And Israel has a right to self-defense subject to the rules of international humanitarian law. But it clearly has that right. So I found it a remarkable presentation yesterday, and I think it raises a lot of problematic issues regarding the court and Israel's engagement with the court.
Andrew, we talked about the international legislation. I'd like to take our conversation to the national ones. As you know, you have more than 30 nationalities among the hostages and the victims of this crime against humanity. How complex, in your assessment, is it to filing complaints against Hamas, whether individuals or as an entity, in the different countries of citizenship of the victims? For example, in the UK, in France, in Germany, maybe in the Netherlands.
Right. Well, it is a complex issue. That is, namely, how do you make sure that Hamas is held accountable for the various crimes which it has committed? So basically, it's the principle of universality which would enable the crimes which are committed on the territory of the State of Israel to be prosecuted under the criminal law system of national states. So it would be under that principle that proceedings could be brought. Let's say, for example, it's a joint German-Israeli citizen, and I think proceedings have been launched in various member states of the European Union and other states in the United States as well, I believe, to prosecute Hamas for crimes. Now, it's a question of national criminal law liability. There's also potential of civil law proceedings. I know this has been attempted in the Netherlands against Israeli leaders, but it's something that happens under the national system of the criminal law of those countries.
Andrew, do you think it would be beneficial for the State of Israel if private lawyers like French lawyers or German lawyers would file complaints at the ICC? Can they file complaints defending the clients at the ICC? Would that be a welcome move in your view?
It's a tricky question. The prosecutor yesterday really put out an invitation to NGOs, particularly to engage with the court, file evidence with the courts. The court will receive evidence submitted by any organization or even individual, provided that evidence is admissible in the court. So that's what the court is looking for, is evidence that is admissible. So it would have to be, you would have to be in possession of evidence which is of value to the court that the court would not otherwise have. That's the first point. The second point is whether that's a wise move or not. The problem, I think, with the courts is adding legitimacy to this set of proceedings. Any submission of a complaint or communication to the court is in a way implying that the court has legitimacy, that it does have jurisdiction. And Israel's strong view in this is the court has no jurisdiction whatsoever. This is because Palestine is not a state. Palestine, therefore, can't be a state party to the court. The court is interfering in what is a conflict between Israel and Palestinians. There are other mechanisms for dealing with that conflict. And therefore, the court should not be investigating what are largely political issues, namely the settlement policies of the state of Israel. That is one of the main issues that the prosecutor wants to prosecute under the Rome Statute, is the crime of so-called settlements. And this is what Israel vehemently opposes and says, no, this is not an issue for the International Criminal Court. The court has no business dealing with what is a political issue. And that's one of the main reasons Israel decided not to join the court when the International Criminal Court was established in 2002. So I think it would be difficult to, I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, but I think it's going to be difficult to do it in a way that doesn't lend legitimacy to the court.
The dual-edged sword.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Right.
And there are arguments that, that it might be, it could be strategically helpful by putting material to the court which is going to force it to look much more seriously at the claims against Hamas for war crimes than otherwise might do. But there's also the risk that it's going to lead the court down this path of even more vehemently looking at prosecuting Israelis. And this is not what we don't want, I think.
Andrew, I would like to explore with you the question of who is ultimately, or who can ultimately be held accountable. So my first question is about how do you hold non-state actors accountable? This is the disease of 21st century warfare. This is not just Hamas, okay? This is Wagner, this is whatever you want. So this is the first question. And the second one, which is connected, is related to the responsibilities in that massacre. Should we consider that Hamas operatives alone are responsible, but Hamas is not a legal entity, or individuals who sponsored, who financed, who perpetrated, who planned? Do you consider that governments or states are responsible, such as Iran and Qatar, that have financed Hamas for years and built up its military capabilities? Should we consider that Palestinian civilians are responsible? With Daniel Chadney, we were in Beirut this week, and we were told that hundreds of Palestinian civilians entered Israel, raping, looting, torturing, killing, not Hamas terrorists, Palestinian civilians. Or should responsibility be collectively assessed? This is a complex question to me.
Yes. Well, it's a tricky question. The first point is that the court has jurisdiction over crimes committed by nationals of state parties or crimes committed on the territory of a state party. So first of all, the crimes committed on the territory of the state of Israel, Israel is not a party to the court, right? So it would have to be a national of a state party being a national of the so-called state of Palestine. Would then potentially be subject to the jurisdiction of the courts. Then you have crimes committed in Gaza, which is considered to be part of the territory of the state of Palestine, according to the court. And the court there would have jurisdiction over any crime committed by any nationality, in my understanding, on that territory. So that locates, as it were, the crime either by way of nationality or territory, which makes it more difficult when you start extending the matter to third states or individuals in third states who are inciting, assisting, perpetrating crimes at a distance, right? So the prosecutor is limited to specific crimes committed. They have to be crimes within the definition of the statute, the Rome Statute, committed by a national of a state party or on the territory of a state party. So this means that the crimes on the 7th of October in the south of Israel would have to be linked to specific individuals who are could be seen as nationals of the state of Palestine. They can be nationals, they are individuals, or they can be collective, it can be groups of individuals, but the crimes have to be proven to have been committed by those persons. The court prosecutes individuals and not states or organizations as such.
Andrew, to wrap up, before we leave questions to the audience, if you were to be, the legal advisor of the Prime Minister, which steps would you take to hold Hamas accountable from all the complexities that you presented to us? What are the main, the most effective venues of action for the state of Israel today, in your assessment, to hold Hamas accountable?
Well, this is an issue, which we are still looking into. So I don't have a final view, really. I think that there are many different. I would advise sort of looking at many different jurisdictions and possibilities. I think the national courts are important. I think that it's going to be terribly important to be looking at Hamas as a legal entity and those who are, let me just get rid of that if you don't mind, those who are financing and supporting and facilitating Hamas. So one of the avenues is to chase the money, look at the money trails that have been going to Hamas from Iran, from Qatar and others. I think that will be extremely important. Hamas is, of course, listed as a terror organization in the European Union. There are consequences for anybody who might be supporting Hamas, whether financially or otherwise. And there are all kinds of organizations and individuals in Europe who clearly have been and are supporting Hamas. So I would strongly recommend that be looked into, because it's not just Hamas operating on its own. It's part of this network which makes Hamas possible.
Right.
And I think it's this network that has to be attacked. And obviously that has strong links to the main sponsor, Iran. And I think we have to look at Qatar as well, and making Qatar responsible and held liable for its role in making Hamas able to carry out these operations?
Thank you so much, Andrew, for exposing this integral approach. I think it's